الله الرحمن الرحيم، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أرحب بكم جميعا في جلسة العمل الرابعة للمؤتمر الدولي حول المرأة في الإسلام، والذي حقيقة استفدت منه كثيرا من خلال المناقشات الثرية التي تم إجراؤها في جلسات العمل السابقة. وستناول موضوع هذه الجلسة دور المرأة المسلمة في المجتمعات المعاصرة، ويستعرض الفرص والتحديات التي تواجهها. السيدات والسادة الكرام، تواجه المرأة المسلمة في المجتمعات الإسلامية وغير الإسلامية المعاصرة مزيجاً من الفرص والتحديات، ويبرز التحدي الأكبر والأكثر قسوة فيما تواجهه أمهاتنا وأخواتنا في غزة الآن. وأي تحد يمكن مواجهته أكبر من أن تحرم هؤلاء النساء من حقهن في الحياة؟ إلى جانب هذا التحدي، لا يمكن كذلك إنكار حقيقة التقدم الذي تم إحرازه في المجالات التعليمية والمهنية. ومع ذلك لا تزال هناك تحديات مثل الصورة النمطية وعدم المساواة في الحقوق الاقتصادية والاجتماعية، وبعض القيود الثقافية الناجمة عن السياسات والقوانين التمييزية التي لا تراعى أو لا تراعي المبادئ والقيم الراسخة في الإسلام. ولمناقشة مختلف هذه القضايا يسعدني أن أقدم المتحدثة الأولى في هذه الجلسة، وهي معالي السيدة حنة رباني، أول سيدة باكستانية تتولى منصب وزيرة الخارجية بجمهورية باكستان الإسلامية. شغلت سابقاً منصب وزير الدولة للشؤون الخارجية ووزير الدولة للسياسات الاقتصادية، عضو في البرلمان الباكستاني، حاصلة على الماجستير في إدارة الأعمال، وهي متحدثة دولية في العلاقات الدولية. تستعرض في هذه الجلسة المرأة المسلمة في المجال الدبلوماسي، التحديات والفرص. تفضلي دكتورة. تفضل.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum to everyone. It is truly my great pleasure and honor to be here today amidst all of you. It is also, I want to take this opportunity to thank for the Kingdom and its leadership for convening a forum to talk about women in Islam at a time when many women in Islam are suffering through brutal violence as we speak. Brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, as someone who has been a practitioner of diplomacy, hailing from a Muslim country, representing a Muslim country, I am someone who believes in diplomacy. I am someone who believes in the power of humanity and how that drives us. I'm someone who also would like to believe in the power of the OIC. Therefore, what I want to say today is perhaps going to be based more on the reality of the world that we have in front of us and the challenges of being able to do diplomacy effectively in such strained times, rather than talk or celebrate the many achievements that women across Islam have been able to make. But before I do that, I do want to say that I think the Muslim world has much to explain for allowing the status of women that was given to women by Islam in the very beginning of Islam, by Prophet Muhammad, may peace be upon him, himself, through his life, through the life of his dear wife, Hazrat Khadija, how we have allowed Islam, or in the status that Islam gave to women, to be taken away through culture, norms, and barriers which were created by men, which had nothing to do with Islamic injunctions. And I think we have much to explain. As we have Ms. Fatima Gilani sitting over here, who was the spokesperson of the Mujahideen, in 30 years back, how do we explain what is happening in Afghanistan today in the name of Islam? I say do whatever you want to do, but do not exploit my religion. a religion that gave women izzat, as we call it, gave women its stature. Do not use Islam to explain your bigotry against women, and do not take opportunities away from women in the name of Islam. But as we sit here, or as I stand here, I think what we're seeing is the unleashing of a greater wrong which is being done using the shrouds of all the right words. What we see happening in the world today is perhaps the falling of our common humanity, and the belief in humanity perhaps will be taken away. As I said, as someone who believes in the power of diplomacy, I think diplomacy today is suffering through its worst moments in history. Because diplomacy is supposed to be the art of the impossible, the art of finding solutions, the art of going and helping against violence, the art of being able to propel human values in a way which can be useful and which is there to support the weak and not strengthen the violent. In today's world, what we're seeing is remarkable, and perhaps nothing else explains it better than the words of the Secretary General of the United Nations. I think we may agree or disagree with any institution, but there's no country in the world which would disagree with the Charter of the UN, or which would say outrightly that they do not believe in the Charter of the UN. When the United Nations Secretary General tells us, and I quote him, Gaza is becoming a graveyard for children. Hundreds of girls are reportedly being killed or injured every day. More journalists have been killed in the last 4 weeks period than any other conflict, at least in the last 3 decades. More UN aid workers have been killed than in any comparable period in the history of our organization. And by our organization, he's referring to the United Nations. Ladies and gentlemen, I think it is compelling upon all of us to really ask ourselves the question that how have we created a world order in which we sit and see this on our television screens and try and justify it, and then veto-wielding countries continue to use their veto not only to allow a country to continue the violence and genocide, but also to veto even humanitarian pauses. Can we even call it a fair world order? Forget fair, can we even call it order of any form? As I said, if diplomacy is reduced to finding justification to allow the perpetuation of war in language which is shrouded in peace, then we can say that none of us will believe in diplomacy anymore. We have experienced violence at a scale which is unprecedented, and we have seen its justifications in language which is taken from the UN Charter itself. We have seen the justification of genocide and portrayed it as a quest for peace. I share with you some remarkable quotes that I find remarkable in many, many ways, because as we see this happening, we have one of the most important countries in the world tell us that it is now in the darkest moment that we must fight hardest to preserve a path for stability, security, opportunity, integration, prosperity, and peace, not tomorrow, not after this war, but today. And it is the same country which has vetoed singularly humanitarian pauses and ceasefire as we speak. We all know by now that thousands and thousands of people in Gaza are being killed every day. Children are being killed with impunity, and this impunity has been given by the world order itself. We are told that these are intractable disputes. You know, the region that I come from also, we are told that this is intractable disputes. Kashmir is an intractable dispute. Palestine is an intractable dispute. These are not intractable disputes. These are disputes which have been made intractable by us providing shelter to those that we should be condemned for their violence and for the use. These are intractable because exceptions from world order and from institutional prowess have been given to these because they happen to be in one camp or the other. I think what we see today is that the world is not only falling apart, but our belief in common humanity is also falling apart. And the only ray of hope that we perhaps see is not from the leaders of the world. The leaders of the world are perhaps involved in the perpetuation of war, but from the youth that is emerging, both from Muslim countries and non-Muslim countries. From the youth that is saying it is no more acceptable to use the language of peace to perpetuate war. And it is perhaps impossible for us in this time to celebrate the many successes that we might have had in the Muslim world pertaining to women, the country that we are sitting in right now, or standing in right now, where I'm standing right now. Yesterday, I was out on the streets, and it was wonderful to see women drive. And then I asked myself the question that how wonderful is it, but is it a right that has to be given to women? Is it, so it's interesting how we have allowed many, and therefore I think it is something to celebrate as to how the doors of opportunity are opening for women in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. In my backyard, or in my vicinity of where I come from, as those doors of opportunity close to the Afghan women, I think it is absolutely correct for Muslim countries to ask of the Afghan government as to who has given them the right to close the door of opportunity exclusively for women, and to use it as a tool for social cohesion, so to speak. To weaponize the freedom that is granted by God to women, to weaponize that for social cohesion and for political ends. For too long, political ends have been met by the strangulation of women and their rights. And till the time that we continue to justify one behavior after the other, I think we will not be able to move forward. And I can tell you this with full assurance and confidence of someone who has been on the sidelines of, and sometimes in the mainstream of diplomacy for the last 20 years, that the state of the world today is, when history is written, we will be condemned as the worst people or generation which enabled violence, extermination, genocide, and used words of security, protection, and human rights to protect violence, extermination, genocide. And if we continue to sit and watch this on our TV screens unfold, this tragedy unfold, and are able to only reduce ourselves to making speeches about it, history will condemn us and history will judge us. I think it is time that we move away from just condemnations. We need to show through our actions what is it that we are capable of. And if the answer is that we are capable of nothing, then I think we should stop telling the Palestinian people that they are not alone, and let them know that they have been alone for a very, very long time. And let them know that we will allow their extermination and their genocide to be explained through the UN Charter. And let them know perhaps that, like George Orwell said, some animals are equal, but some are more equal than others, that in the UN Charter we can make a change and say all humans are equal, but some humans are more equal than others. It is time that we start making diplomacy function. Diplomacy has been reduced to using a lot of words to end up saying absolutely nothing, so that we don't leave a mark. So we are able to not seem to be against anyone. I think it is important that we stand up and say that we are against genocide, we are against extermination, and we are also against those countries which are playing an active role in its perpetuation, which are authorizing this as we speak. I have read to you statements. I know that all of us in this room are aware of the dozens of times that veto power has been used to give coverage to Israeli settlements, to give coverage to Israeli genocide, to give coverage to Israeli extermination. And this is not, let me say this out loud, a question of anti-Semitism. I think there are many Jews which are rising up and speaking against this because they believe in common values, as so we must. All of us must believe in common values. We are not. I also think it is about time that the Muslim world is also able to wake up to the reality of the fact that we have allowed Islam to be explained by actions of entities such as Al-Qaeda and have been purely and fully put on the defensive. That is not Islam by any means. It is the absolute opposite of Islam. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as we go further, I do want to just talk about briefly, perhaps, about the challenges and the opportunities that exist in the world as we face perhaps one of the most grotesque chapters of human history. You know what is grotesque about it is perhaps that it is being enabled by countries who claim to protect and who are in fact the architects of the human rights architecture, who are in fact the architects of the developmental architecture. So it is not countries which are seen to be extremist countries or countries which are seen to be, oligarchical countries or countries which are seen to be dictatorial countries which are enabling this. It is countries which profess belief in democratic values and human rights which are becoming enablers. I think it is important that our common humanity is able to come and start speaking the truth and being able to find common solutions rather than perpetuate violence and dispute. As I said, I think it is also perhaps important to talk about some of the challenges and some of the opportunities that exist today. I think the biggest challenge, and I've said this enough, and I probably at the cost of repetition would say this again, that it is important that we are not able to weaponize the human rights agenda and the developmental agenda and the democratic agenda to explain this violence, this extermination, this genocide. It is also important that we are able to close the biggest challenge is to close the credibility gap that exists all over the world when they see these actions and the perpetuation of this. It is important also for us to make sure that this is not the end of our common humanity, that is, that we are able to see some commonality of values. The opportunity that exists is that what we call universal values can only be universal values if they are universally applied. If they're applied to those who are residing in the Arab world in the same way to those who are residing in the European world. It is also an important opportunity that we are able to listen to the calls of the young and the youth, be it in the streets of New York, Washington, D.C., or in the Arab streets. I think the youth is giving us a very important message, and the message is that they will not take this anymore, that they will not take our explaining of violent extremist methods through language which is shrouded, as I said, and veiled in human rights and in democratic rights and in the fight for the right, that they will not stand for it anymore. And as we do that, I think it is important to understand that some of the explanations that are given, such as self-defense, have already been catered for in 2005 by the ICJ, as to whether that, according to the UN Charter, is explained or not. Every UN body is right now telling us that this is one of the worst moments in human history. When the UN bodies that we have created ourselves and that we believe in are telling us that something is happening, we cannot afford to look away. And I think in this time when there is very little to celebrate, let us celebrate some people who are standing up. I want to mention over here Craig Mochiber, the director of the New York office of the UNHCR, the UN High Commission for Human Rights, who resigned on 28th of October, and his words were that this is a textbook genocide where the intent is not hidden but is actually celebrated. I think it is really a moment of reckoning for the Muslim world and for the non-Muslim world, because if this continues, our belief in commonality of human values, our belief in humanity, and will no more be there. Even more importantly, the world order that we talk about, which has already fragmented in front of our eyes, I don't think there will be any order left to be seen. And we will, as we already are perhaps, going into a fast train wreck in a world which is reckless, which is disorderly, where each one will be able to do, whoever has the military might will be able to attack and explain it all through the UN Charter. So I would just want to end over here by saying that Islam has always been a religion of peace. I think it is about time that we are able to take the explaining of Islam away from those people who have taken our religion, hijacked our religion, and made it out to be different. I think it is important for us to stop being defensive of the values that Islam has inculcated. Islam was the first religion which went against female infanticide. Islam had the Prophet, may peace be upon him, wife, who was the trader and the earner for the family. How far away from those principles of Islam have we come? And as we see all of these women sitting over here, and the women in the streets of Saudi Arabia, the women in the streets of other countries, my own country, where one of our prime ministers was the most celebrated woman, Benazir Bhutto, all over the world. She fought for her rights. She fought for not only for her rights, but the rights of not only Muslim women, but the people of Pakistan for democracy. We have enough examples, and I know enough of this has been celebrated, so I thought I would perhaps talk about how, as a woman who has been sometimes in the forefront, sometimes on the sidelines of diplomacy, I feel that diplomacy should no longer be used to explain violence, extermination, and genocide. Diplomacy is an effective tool to put a stop to that. We should not exploit and weaponize diplomacy to normalize extermination, genocide, and the killing of innocent people, men, women, and children, as we speak. And we cannot, as humanity, sit here and just experience it silently. At the very least, speak about it. But I think it is within our power as countries, not only Muslim countries, but all countries who believe in the commonality of human values, to start at least calling a spade, to start calling out people who are explaining this, and to try and use diplomacy as an effective tool to find solutions and not to be a continuation of the perpetuation of war and extermination.
شكرا معالي السيدة حنة رباني على هذه المداخلة، والتي أكدت في ورقتها الحاجة إلى الإقرار بالقيمة الجوهرية للتنوع في العمل الدبلوماسي. ننتقل للحديث حول دور المرأة المسلمة في الاقتصاد والحياة العامة في الدول الإسلامية، أرقام وإحصائيات، وأبرز التحديات التي تواجه المرأة المسلمة في المجتمعات المعاصرة، في ورقة علمية تقدمها معالي السيدة زهراء زمرد سلجوق، مديرة مركز الأبحاث الإحصائية والاقتصادية والاجتماعية والتدريب سيسرك، التابع لمنظمة التعاون الإسلامي، ووزيرة سابقة للعمل والخدمات الاجتماعية والأسرة في تركيا، شغلت منصب كبير الباحثين في سيسرك سابقاً، حاصلة على شهادة دكتوراه في الاقتصاد ودكتوراه في إدارة الأعمال. فلتتفضل.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First of all, it's a great pleasure for me to participate in the International Conference on Women in Islam and address your esteemed gathering. At the outset, I would like to express my sincere appreciation and thanks to the host of Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for their warm hospitality, and my thanks and appreciation are also extended to OIC General Secretariat for their active role in the preparation of this conference. Ladies and gentlemen, Islam teaches the fundamental equality of all human beings. Women and men are both creations of Allah and deserve respect and recognition in all aspects of life. Yet millions of women are in a disadvantaged position across the world, including OIC member countries. This state of affairs severely affects the lives of women by limiting their active participation in public life and undermining their contribution to the development of our societies. However, in some places, like in Gaza, we don't even get to the needs of women. We don't even get to the economic and social challenges they faced, as their families are being erased totally. As we gather here today, we meet under the shadow of the barbaric Israeli aggression and heinous massive attacks in Gaza. In just a month, the number of Palestinians killed under Israeli attacks has reached more than 10,000. This is not a mere number. This is not a cold statistics. This is 10,000 lives. And the vast majority of them are women and children, even infants less than 1 year old. Some go from womb to the tomb. Exclude them lost under the rubble. 50,000 women, pregnant women in Gaza will give birth only if they can survive. The children write their names on their bodies for being identified. Palestinian women and girls don't seem to meet the criteria for so-called human rights. They don't seem to be the woman in women's rights. Now, some OIC countries have intensified their efforts for immediate ceasefire to prevent further civilian casualties and to ensure humanitarian access and civilian protection. All of us have to lift the voices of Palestine so that the voices against genocide can reach everywhere in the world. In this moment, it becomes more important and more imperative for us to stand together as OIC member countries against the crimes perpetrated by Israel, which are all flagrant violations of international norms and laws and the most basic principles of humanity. Ladies and gentlemen, women play a vital role in the economic development of societies. In particular, through entrepreneurial activities, women could generate income for their families and societies, as well as they create jobs and trigger economic growth. Their active engagement in economic activities not only brings prosperity to women themselves, but also to their families and societies. In this regard, they are not only the backbone of families, but also the workforce and the economy. Accordingly, women's empowerment promotes economic growth, reduces poverty, decreases income inequality, enhances social well-being, increases business performance and innovation, and fosters sustainable development. Women account for half of the population almost everywhere in the world. As the OIC countries make up 1/4 of the world's total population, they also make up 1/4 of the world's female population. As the OIC countries, on the other hand, women constitute 1/3 of the labor force, which is below the global average of 40% as of 2022. To put into perspective, the female labor force of the OIC countries makes up only 18% of the global female labor force. I want to note that the share of OIC countries in the global male labor force reaches as high as 23%. We can also observe a similar situation in the case of labor force participation rates. Although OIC countries have comparable performance to the global average in terms of male labor force participation rate, their performance in the case of female labor force participation rate remains significantly poorer. As of 2022, female labor force participation rate averages at 38 in the OIC countries compared with 47 in the world. This also shows a large disparity between males and females in terms of labor force participation rate in the OIC countries, because in the OIC countries there is a gap as high as 36 points, whereas in the world it is about 25%. On the positive side, we can see that 24 of our OIC countries have female labor force participation rates exceeding the global average. And the highest female labor force participation rate is observed in Mozambique, and it was followed by Uganda, Cameroon, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, Niger, and Qatar, which also have labor force participation rates over 60. Coming to unemployment, women in OIC countries not only have limited participation in labor force, but also cannot easily find a job in the market due to limited job opportunities, but also some social norms. As a result, in the OIC countries, female unemployment rate on average consistently remains higher than that of the males. As of 2022, the average unemployment rate for females has measured at 7.4, whereas it is 5.7 for males. And when we look at the employment by sector, we can see that almost half of the female employers work in the services sector, which is less than the global average of 59%. More importantly, the agriculture sector accounts for a much higher share of female employment in the OIC countries than in the world. So we can say that it is well-known fact that in developing countries, informal employment is more common in the services sector, and particularly in the agriculture sector, and that makes women more vulnerable. Moreover, unlike the industry sector, the services and the agriculture sectors are more affected by seasonality, which increases the chances of vulnerable employment as well. So, to prevent vulnerable employment, we need to focus on social security systems. Social security programs and safety nets for working women allow women to be more economically active. In this regard, it is essential to review legislation and regulations to ensure the maintenance of wages and benefits during maternity, prevention of dismissal or termination during pregnancy, and to allow for maternity leave. These safeguards ensure that pregnant employers are treated fairly and are not subject to discrimination due to their pregnancy status. For instance, when we look at the data, the presence of 14-week paid maternity leave standard and its implementation are critical to empower women, especially during their pregnancy. While 29 OIC member countries met this standard 1 decade ago, now this number reached 32 member countries in 2023. Similarly, dismissal of pregnant workers is prohibited in 34 OIC member countries today, which is up from 31 1 decade ago. And as we know, participation in decision-making processes is also important for reflecting the perspectives of women to all decision-making areas. So enhancing women-making participation is a key condition for women's empowerment. And one of the crucial indicators used in this regard is their representation in the parliament. And the latest available data show that in the world, 1 in 4 members of the parliament is women. When we look at the OIC as a group, we see that in the OIC countries, it is measured at 20%, which means that 1 in 5 MPs are women in the OIC group. And when we look at additionally, women are increasingly playing prominent roles in leadership and management positions across various sectors. Looking at the women in managerial positions, the global proportion of women in all managerial positions is around 34, whereas in the OIC countries group is at around 28. Considering the figures above, we can say that women are still underrepresented in decision-making processes, particularly in politics and managerial positions. So to this end, OIC member countries need to take additional measures to achieve equal representation of women in positions of power and leadership, whether in corporate boardrooms, in managerial positions, and national parliaments. But when we come to the research and development area, the availability of abundant and highly qualified researchers, we know that is an essential precondition to fostering innovation and promoting scientific and technological development in a country. And in the past decades, women with improved access to training and education facilities have become more qualified and motivated to participate in the labor force. As a result, women researchers represent around 40% of total researchers in the OIC countries, and this is much higher than the nearly 10% higher than the world average of 30%. So we can say that the OIC countries as a group perform comparatively better in the area of research and in the area of representation of women in the research and development. Nevertheless, a significant portion of female youth in the OIC region stays out of the labor market or education institutions, what we call as not in youth, not in education, employment, or training needs. So large parts of this female youth or their families need social protection mechanisms to survive. The lack of safety nets or their limited scope discourages girls from going to public schools and or getting some vocational training. Several OIC countries need to develop more improved, well-developed safety measures for disadvantaged and vulnerable populations, including millions of women and girls. For instance, in the OIC member countries, the share of female youth not in education, employment, or training was around 42% in 2022. It's a rate higher than most of the groups like the world, non-OIC developing or developed groups in the world. So without decreasing female needs in the OIC region, we can say that it is impossible to empower women and improve their social and economic status. And despite the gains and progress made, especially in the literacy rates over the past decade, the OIC countries on average continue to lag behind, particularly in female literacy rate. Available data show that the literacy rate for women averages around 72% as a group, which is lower than the global average of 84%. Moreover, it is important to note that the male-female literacy gap persists across the country groups to the disadvantage of females. When we come to the violence against women, we can see that there are very much dedicated efforts of OIC member countries to protect women from violence, and it seems to pay off. The prevalence of violence in the lifetime decreased significantly in the OIC countries over the last 5 years, and it is now around 30%. And similarly, attitudes towards violence has also declined to 32.8%. So actually, we can say that despite the existent challenges related to women's economic and socio-economic status, many good examples exist at the national level in most of our member countries. And progress has been achieved in many of our member countries. A critical data set that our center obtained directly from 27 of our member countries through a survey on the implementation of the OIC Plan of Action on the advancement of women in 2019 reveals a strong message. It states that as per the survey results, 63% of the respondent OIC countries reported progress towards the objectives of the Plan of Action in the domain of the economic empowerment of women, and also similarly in the domain of women's participation in the decision-making processes. 72% of our member countries, responded member countries, reported they have made significant progress. In another domain, important domain, in the area of social protection of women, 69% of respondent countries reported that they have made progress. So we can say that compared to 1 decade ago, most of our member countries have made significant areas in improving the economic and social status of women in our member countries. And when we come to the inter-OIC level, we as OIC organized 8 sessions of the Ministerial Conference on Women since 2006. And also the 8th Islamic Ministerial Conference on Women was held in Cairo in July 2021. So we can say that, moreover, OIC member countries adopted the OIC Plan of Action on the Advancement of Women, the OIC 10-year Program of Action, and the OIC 2021 Program of Action. Also, we have now a Women Development Organization to streamline the joint Islamic action for the welfare and empowerment of women. And as CESRIC, we are also producing research studies, training and capacity building programs, and also under our comprehensive database called OIC Stat, we are having gender-related, family-related, and youth-related indicators under our database. So let me conclude my presentation with a few highlights and policy implications. Despite all remarkable efforts, the disadvantaged position of women, particularly in economic life, remains a stark reality in some of our member countries. Therefore, additional efforts and initiatives are needed to empower women across the Islamic world. And to this end, primarily the education of women is critical for the well-being and active participation of women in work life. And also, it is important to scale up investment in the education and training of the girls and women in the Islamic world. Also, social security systems and safety nets are very important to encourage women's active participation in the labor market. In this regard, it is also essential to review the legislations and regulations to remove all existing barriers, as well as to make more powerful social security systems. Additionally, inter-OIC cooperation has great potential and could generate important benefits to our member states in the area of socio-economic empowerment of women, such as by enabling sharing of best practices and transferring of know-how and knowledge. So I would like to highlight that we cannot achieve sustainable development goals or our women empowerment agendas by ignoring or not addressing the problems and challenges of women. Therefore, it is our duty as international, regional, and national institutions to work together to improve the status of women and address the challenges faced by them in all over the world. I am confident that discussions and deliberations during this conference will be highly instrumental and in promoting and enhancing cooperation among us. And I believe that this timely conference is very critical to explore common solutions and address common challenges faced by women in OIC member countries. Thank you very much.
شكراً معالي السيدة زهراء على هذه المداخلة القيمة والتي تطرقت فيها على المبادرات والبرامج التي تقدمها منظمة التعاون الإسلامي وسيسرك واهتمامها بالنهوض بوضع المرأة في المجالات التنموية. المتحدثة الثالثة في هذه الجلسة سعادة الدكتورة هيفاء جمل الليل، رئيسة جامعة عفة للبنات بجدة، رئيسة جامعة عفة الأهلية للبنات بجدة، وهي أول امرأة سعودية تتولى رئاسة جامعة، شغلت منصب أول عميدة لشطر الطالبات في جامعة الملك عبد العزيز بالمملكة العربية السعودية، حاصلة على درجة الدكتوراه في السياسة العامة، ولها العديد من الكتب والمقالات، فلتتفضل مشكورة.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، والحمد لله رب العالمين، حمداً كثيراً مباركاً فيه كما ينبغي لجلال وجهه وعظيم سلطانه، والصلاة والسلام على خير العالمين الصادق الأمين سيد المرسلين وإمام النبيين محمد بن عبد الله وعلى آله وصحبه والتابعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. أصحاب السمو والمعالي والسعادة، أعضاء الوفود المشاركة في المؤتمر، ضيوفنا الكرام، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. اسمحوا لي أن أستهل كلمتي بالترحيب بضيوف المؤتمر في بيتهم الثاني المملكة العربية السعودية، وأشكر الجميع على الثقة التي منحتموها لوطن الحبيب والتي عكسها اختياركم له لاستضافة هذا الحدث الدولي الأهم والأكبر على الإطلاق مكانة وتمكين المرأة في الإسلام. وأتقدم بتوجيه جزيل الشكر وعظيم الامتنان والتقدير للقائمين على هذا المؤتمر من مقام وزارة الخارجية بالمملكة العربية السعودية والأمانة العامة لمنظمة التعاون الإسلامي على دعوتي للمشاركة في موضوع تعليم المرأة كرافد أساسي لتمكين المرأة ونهضة المجتمعات الإسلامية المعاصرة. وأسأل الله العلي القدير أن يرفع الضرر عن أهلنا في فلسطين ويقويهم بالإيمان الكبير وينصرهم على أعدائهم أعداء الإسلام، آمين يا رب العالمين. الحضور الكريم، جميعنا يعلم ويؤمن بأن وظيفة الإنسان في الكون وخلافته في الأرض لا يتم تحقيقها إلا من خلال العلم الذي يسبق العمل. ومن هذا المنطلق اهتم الإسلام اهتماماً كبيراً بالعلم وطلبه واعتبره فريضة على كل مسلم رجل كان أم امرأة ليكونوا عابدين لله ومعمرين للكون. ويحفل التاريخ الإسلامي بأمثلة كثيرة من طالبات العلم المتعلمات والمعلمات اللاتي برزن في شتى المجالات العلمية. ولقد حظى تعليم المرأة حالياً باهتمام العالم المعاصر، ليست كمجرد قضية بحث فكري أو نظري، بل تعدت في غزارة طرحها الآفاق، سواء في المؤتمرات الدولية أو الإقليمية أو المحلية. وذلك لأن إسهام المرأة المسلمة في التنمية مرتبط بتحسين وضعها أولاً من خلال توفير فرصة تعليم وتهيئة الظروف والإمكانيات الاجتماعية والاقتصادية والسياسية أمامها لتمكينها من المشاركة في تنمية مجتمعها. ضيوفنا الكرام، لقد كشفت نتائج تقرير سسرك الأخير لخطة عمل منظمة التعاون الإسلامي للنهوض بالمرأة والتنمية، خطة أوباوا لعام 2021، بأن الدول الأعضاء في منظمة التعاون الإسلامي قطعت خطوات كبيرة. ويسرني أن كلمتي جاءت بعد الدكتورة زهرة زمرد، لأنها أعطت جزء كبير من المعلومات في حصتها. فقطعت دول منظمة التعاون الإسلامي خطوات كبيرة في معالجة التفاوتات بين الجنسين في العديد من القطاعات خلال العقد الماضي. ولقد كان ذلك نتيجة صياغة وتنفيذ عدد من اللوائح والسياسات والممارسات بشكل فعال، مما قلل عدم المساواة بين الجنسين بين عامي 2010 و2018 في 36 دولة من أعضاء منظمة التعاون الإسلامي، وفقاً للمعدلات المسجلة على مؤشر التنمية الجنسانية GDI التي تقيس الفجوات بين الجنسين في مجالات الصحة والتعليم ومستويات المعيشة. بالإضافة إلى ذلك، صارت المرأة في البلدان الأعضاء في المنظمة في المتوسط أكثر تواجداً في أسواق العمل والسلطات المعنية بصنع القرارات، فضلاً عن الساحة السياسية، كما هو الحال بالنسبة لحصة المرأة في البرلمانات التي ارتفعت بنسبة 4.6 نقطة مئوية بين عامي 2010 و2019. ومع ذلك ومع كل هذا التقدم لا يزال هناك العديد من المجالات المثيرة للقلق والتي تحتاج إلى مزيد من التحسينات للتخفيف من التحديات التي تواجهها المرأة في تمكينها. فبالرغم من التقدم الملحوظ الذي قدمته العديد من الدول الأعضاء في اعتماد سياسات وبرامج اجتماعية واقتصادية للنهوض بالمرأة، إلا أن السبب الرئيسي في تدني دور وعطاء المرأة في مجتمعاتها يعود إلى تباين مناهج وسبل التعليم بين الدول الأعضاء، حيث أشار التقرير أنه بالرغم من أن بعض الدول الأعضاء أحدثت نقلة نوعية في مجال التعليم، حيث ارتفع معدل القراءة والكتابة في صفوف الإناث من 66.9% إلى 72.8%، إلا أن هذا المعدل لا يزال متدنياً للغاية وهو 46.9% في بعض المناطق الفرعية للمنظمة. من هنا يمكن الاستنتاج أن التعليم هو المحفز والتحدي الأساسي والرئيسي لتمكين المرأة، وبالتالي تفعيل دورها وقياس عطائها في الأبعاد السبعة التي أشار إليها تقرير المنظمة، والذي استند في حيثياته على خطة أوباوا 2016 للنهوض بدور المرأة، وذلك في الدورة السادسة للمؤتمر الوزاري حول دور المرأة في التنمية في الدول الأعضاء في إسطنبول، حيث كان توفير فرص متساوية لجميع النساء والفتيات في الحصول على التعليم الجيد على جميع المستويات والتدريب المهني وتنمية المهارات، فضلاً عن برامج محو الأمية من الأهداف التسعة الرئيسية للخطة. ولتسليط الضوء على قصص نجاح بعض الممارسات الفضلى لتجارب بعض البلدان الأعضاء في منظمة التعاون الإسلامي على مستوى السياسات فيما يتعلق بالنهوض بالمرأة، لعلي أستنير وأسترشد بتجربة المملكة العربية السعودية في مسيرة تطوير التعليم في مجال جميع مراحله، والخطوط العريضة في معالجة التفاوتات بين متطلبات المجتمع الاقتصادية والاجتماعية لتغطية احتياجات سوق العمل من الجنسين في العديد من القطاعات الحكومية والخاصة. ضيوفنا الأكارم، لقد أولت حكومة خادم الحرمين الشريفين منذ عهد الملك عبد العزيز بن عبد الرحمن آل سعود رحمه الله اهتماماً كبيراً بالمرأة السعودية وتعليمها وتمكينها من جميع حقوقها في ضوء ما نصت عليه تعاليم الشريعة الإسلامية السمحة، وحازت على جل اهتمام الملك المؤسس بعد توحيد البلاد، فكان داعماً لكل ما يعزز مكانتها بالعلم والتعليم. ولقد أخذت تطور التعليم المرأة عدة مراحل، بدأت بوضوح عند انتشار كتاتيب تعليم البنات في منطقة الحجاز في عام 1931 حتى وصل إلى 180 داراً منتشرة في مناطق مختلفة في التعليم، ليس فقط للذكور وإنما أيضاً للإناث على حد سواء. وتمثلت المرحلة الثانية في المدارس المنزلية أو شبه النظامية التي كانت بداياتها في عام 1941، واستمرت إلى تاريخ إنشاء 15 مدرسة شبه نظامية لتعليم البنات في عام 1959. وكان النظام التعليمي للبنات شبيه بنظام تعليم البنين، يعتمد أساساً على المبادئ الإسلامية بما في ذلك دراسة القرآن والحديث والمواد التقليدية، بالإضافة إلى بعض المواد الأخرى مثل الخياطة والتفصيل والتطريز والموسيقى والرياضة البدنية في بعض المدارس كالسباحة وغيرها. أما المرحلة الثالثة فتتجسد في ظهور التعليم الأهلي للبنات، والذي سبق التعليم الحكومي بنحو 5 أعوام عندما أنشأت الملكة عفة الثانية آل سعود صاحبة الدور الريادي التعليمي للمرأة مدارس دار الحنان في عام 1955 في جدة. واستطاعت بدعم من زوجها جلالة الملك فيصل يرحمهم الله جميعاً أن تستقطب الأهالي وإقناعهم بأهمية تدريس البنات. ولقد كان من أهداف هذه المدرسة هو تنشئة أمهات على تربية إسلامية الجوهر ومبنية على نظريات التعلم الحديثة، ولقيت المدرسة إقبالاً كثيراً. وعلى إثر هذا النجاح تم إنشاء الرئاسة العامة لتعليم البنات في عام 1380 هجرية، أيضاً في عهد الملك فيصل، لتكون الهيئة الرسمية التعليم التي تتولى التخطيط والإشراف لإدارة تعليم البنات، والتي كانت أساساً في تسريع انتشار المدارس النظامية المجانية للبنات في أنحاء المملكة. وكانت أول فرصة أتيحت للفتاة السعودية للالتحاق بالتعليم العالي الجامعي في داخل المملكة العربية السعودية تلك التي وفرتها جامعة الرياض جامعة الملك سعود حديثاً، التي أنشئت عام 1957، حيث سمحت للفتاة بالانتساب للجامعة من خلال كلية الآداب والعلوم الإدارية. كما أتاحت جامعة الملك بعد ذلك الملك عبد العزيز بجدة منذ بداية إنشائها الفرصة للالتحاق بها في كلية الاقتصاد والإدارة. وفي عام 1967 قامت كلية التربية بمكة المكرمة بافتتاح باب الانتساب أيضاً للطالبات. وفي عام 1971 قامت الرئاسة العامة لتعليم البنات بإنشاء أول كلية خاصة بالبنات وهي كلية التربية بالرياض. وتوالت بعد ذلك الجامعات الحكومية في فتح المجال للراغبات من البنات في مواصلة تعليمهن بنظام الانتساب أو الانتظام حسب رغبتهن، وبمكافأة شهرية مقدارها 1000 ريال لكل طالبة أو طالب، تشجيعاً على التعليم العالي للذكور والإناث على حد سواء. وقد انضم القطاع الخاص الأهلي إلى إنشاء الجامعات الأهلية، وقد قادت أيضاً هذا التحول الريادي الملكة عفة بإنشاء جامعة عفة كأول جامعة أهلية غير ربحية في عام 1999. وتلاها بعد ذلك عدد من الجامعات والكليات الأهلية، إلى أن أصبح حالياً عدد الجامعات الحكومية 30 جامعة حكومية في مترامية الأطراف في المملكة و12 جامعة أهلية، بالإضافة إلى أيضاً بعض الكليات الحكومية والأهلية التي تقدم الدراسات الجامعية. ولا ننسى مساهمة نظام الابتعاث الخارجي والذي بدأ في عهد المؤسس رحمه الله عام 1348 هجرية ببعثة طلابية إلى مصر، وتلاها إلى جميع أنحاء العالم، بل ومستمر إلى وقتنا الحاضر. فلقد استفادت أيضاً أعداداً كبيرة من الطالبات من برنامج الابتعاث التي تقدمها الجامعات والكليات للدراسات الجامعية والعليا لمختلف دول العالم، وخصوصاً أوروبا وأمريكا الشمالية. وفي عام 1429 تم إنشاء أكبر جامعة على مستوى العالم، جامعة الأميرة نورة بنت عبد الرحمن، والتي تعد أول مدينة جامعية حكومية متكاملة خاصة بالمرأة في المملكة العربية السعودية. جامعة الأميرة نورة بنت عبد الرحمن نسبة إلى شقيقة مؤسس المملكة العربية السعودية الملك عبد العزيز بن عبد الرحمن يرحمه الله، مما جعل طموح المرأة السعودية بلا حدود. ومن الجدير بالذكر القول أن سياسة التعليم في المملكة تقوم على أسس معلنة ومتساوية للبنين والبنات، وهذه الأسس: أولاً، التعليم في المملكة ينبثق من الإسلام الذي تدين به الأمة عقيدة وعبادة وخلقا وشريعة وحكما ونظاما متكاملا للحياة. ثانياً، غرس التصور الإسلامي الكامل للكون والإنسان والحياة، وأن الوجود كله خاضع لسنة الله ورسوله ليقوم كل مخلوق بوظيفته دون خلل أو اضطراب. ثالثاً، الحياة الدنيا مرحلة إنتاج وعمل يستثمر فيها المسلم طاقاته عن إيمان وهدى للحياة الأبدية الخالدة في الدار الآخرة. رابعاً، الإيمان بالكرامة الإنسانية التي قررها القرآن الكريم وأناط بها القيام بأمانة الله في الأرض. خامساً، الاستفادة من جميع أنواع المعارف الإنسانية النافعة على ضوء الإسلام للنهوض بالأمة ورفع مستوى حياتها، فالحكمة ضالة المؤمن، أن وجدها فهو أولى الناس بها. سادساً، التناسق المنسجم مع العلم والمنهجية التطبيقية التقنية باعتبارهما من أهم وسائل التنمية الثقافية والاجتماعية والصحية لرفع مستوى أمتنا وبلادنا والقيام بدورنا في التقدم الثقافي العالمي. وسابعاً، التفاعل الواعي مع التطورات الحضارية العالمية في ميادين العلوم والثقافة والآداب، وذلك بتتبعها والمشاركة فيها وتوجيهها بما يعود على المجتمع والإنسانية بالخير والتقدم. ومع الانطلاقة الرسمية لرؤية المملكة العربية السعودية 2030 في إبريل 2016، والتي شملت جميع البرامج التنموية المتنوعة، فكان لتعليم المرأة وتمكينها نصيب وافر منها. ولقد تمحورت رؤية التعليم 2030 في هدف شامل لتحديث المنهج الدراسي ليتوافق مع المعايير العالمية والاحتياجات الاقتصادية الاجتماعية الحالية التي حددتها الرؤية. وتتلخص أهداف الرؤية في ترسيخ الشخصية والقيم الوطنية في الطلاب، تعزيز التراث السعودي والثقافة والقيم الإسلامية، استخدام التكنولوجيا داخل الفصل الدراسي، التركيز على مهارات حل المشكلات والتفكير النقدي، وتعديل المنهج لتلبية متطلبات سوق العمل، البحث والابتكار من خلال تكوين تحالفات مع المنظمات الدولية وتشجيع البحث والتطوير، ورفع مستوى البرامج الأكاديمية للذكور والإناث على حد سواء. ويعد عهد خادم الحرمين الشريفين الملك سلمان بن عبد العزيز آل سعود حفظه الله العصر الذهبي للمسيرة المتنامية للمرأة السعودية، لإدراكه حفظه الله بأنها صانعة الأجيال. ونستطيع أن نجزم بأن التطور الذي يشهده تعليم المرأة هو نتيجة الإصلاح الشامل لتمكين المرأة، وتعكس توجيهات وأوامر خادم الحرمين الشريفين وسمو ولي عهد الأمين حفظهم الله اهتماماً كبيراً بتحقيق كل ما يوفر حياة كريمة للمرأة، وأولت عناية بحقوقها انطلاقاً من مبادئ وأحكام الشريعة الإسلامية التي أوجبت حفظ حقوقها واحترام كرامتها، وحرمت أي ظلم يقع عليها. وعليه تضافرت أنظمة المملكة وفي مقدمتها النظام القضائي لتشكل إطاراً قانونياً يحمي ويعزز حقوق المرأة ويحظر التمييز ضدها، ويوسع دائرة الخدمات المقدمة لها. ومن أهم المحاور التي وضعتها المملكة في برنامج التعاون رفع نسبة مشاركة المرأة في سوق العمل إلى 30%، وذلك من خلال تمكينها في جميع المجالات وجميع التخصصات، وأتاحت لها الاستفادة من جميع الخدمات التي تقدمها دون اشتراط موافقة ولي أمرها، ما لم يكن هناك سند نظامي لهذا الطلب وفقاً لأحكام الشريعة الإسلامية، ففتح كافة المجالات لها لخدمة وطنها بشكل كبير. كما اعتمدت وزارة الداخلية مشروع نظام لمكافحة التحرش ومواصلة دعم حقوق المرأة والأسرة والطفل لتجعل المرأة أحد الأركان المهمة لبناء مستقبل الوطن. وعلى إثر هذه التحولات قامت الجامعات السعودية بتقديم تخصصات جديدة للمرأة السعودية كالقانون والهندسة والصحافة والسياحة، وهي تخصصات كانت مقصورة سابقاً على الرجال. كما واصلت وزارة التعليم العالي فتح باب الابتعاث للخارج لعدد كبير من الخريجات في تخصصات مختلفة وبشروط أكثر مرونة من السابق وبدون إذن ولي أمرها. جميع هذه العوامل ساعدت النساء السعوديات على تسجيل تفوقاً ونجاحاً باهراً في المجالات العلمية، حيث قدمنا في السنوات الماضية عدداً من الاختراعات والإنجازات التي وضعتهن في مصاف العلماء في العالم. ومنهن على سبيل المثال إلى الحصر المهندسة مشاعل بنت ناصر الشميمري التي عينت كأول مهندسة سعودية تعمل في مجال تصميم الصواريخ بوكالة ناسا الأمريكية لدراسات الفضاء، والكيميائية البروفيسورة غادة بنت مطلق المطيري التي تمكنت من تطوير جهاز جديد يستطيع حمل الدواء إلى النقطة المصابة بالالتهاب في داخل جسم الإنسان، والدكتورة حياة سليمان سندي التي عملت على اختراع مجس للموجات الصوتية والمغناطيسية. أما الدكتورة خولة بنت سامي المكرية كبيرة علماء أبحاث السرطان في مستشفى الملك فيصل التخصصي ومركز الأبحاث بالرياض وعضو مجلس الشورى، حازت على وسام الملك عبد العزيز من الطبقة الأولى في 1431 وغيرهم الكثير. الضيوف الكرام، لعل نموذج المملكة العربية السعودية وما أولته من اهتمام للمرأة في تقليل التحديات وتعزيز دورها المحوري وتفعيل مشاركتها في النهضة والتنمية أعطى المشاركين في المؤتمر الصورة الواقعية لأهمية تعليم المرأة كرافد أساسي لتمكينها وإسهامها ومشاركتها للرجل في تقلد مراكز مرموقة تتلائم مع روح المرأة العصرية وتجعل منها فاعلاً في النهضة والتنمية. فجميع الإنجازات والشواهد الملموسة تؤكد تطور التعليم في عصر خادم الحرمين الشريفين وولي عهده الأمين يحفظهم الله، وذلك يؤكد دعم الدولة وفقها الله لتنمية الإنسان السعودي رجلاً أم امرأة ليكون لبنة صالحة في بلده ومساهماً فعالاً في هذا العالم المترامي الأطراف. وهذا يؤكد أن المنطلق الإسلامي التي تنتهجه المملكة لإعداد وتطوير المرأة لمساعدتها لتشارك في التنمية بشكل أفضل أمر لا يتنافى مع مطالب الشرع، بل يؤكد أسسه ومنهاجيته في المساواة بين الرجل والمرأة في الحقوق والواجبات، وتصبح هذه المساواة بين الجنسين واجباً ليس فقط لتحسين وضع المرأة في المجتمع، وإنما لتحقيق المنظومة الإسلامية بكل جوانبها التربوية والتعليمية والاجتماعية والاقتصادية والسياسية والتنموية. ولعل من أبرز التوصيات هنا أهمية التعاون بين الدولة والمجتمع لتوفير الظروف الملائمة لتحصل المرأة على الوعي والثقافة العامة من خلال المؤسسات التعليمية المختلفة لتمكينها للقيام بدورها التنموي في ضوء التحديات التي تواجهها المجتمعات الإسلامية المعاصرة. ومن التوصيات التي يمكن أن تعود بالنفع العام على تعليل المرأة وتمكينها هي حث منظمة التعاون الإسلامي للدول الأعضاء في المساهمة والمشاركة والتعاون على عدة مبادرات. المبادرة الأولى منصات التعلم الرقمية لمواكبة التطور التعليمي في مجال التحول الرقمي، حيث تمكن التكنولوجيا المعلمين والطلاب من إثراء النظام التعليمي. المبادرة الثانية التبادل الثقافي، حث وتشجيع الدول الأعضاء بالتبادل بالباحثين والطلاب والمستثمرين والسياح الذكور والإناث. إنشاء مركزاً للدراسات الإسلامية واللغة العربية لجميع الدول الأعضاء. المشاركة العالمية للمرأة في شؤون ومنتديات تخص المرأة بشكل خاص. وأخيراً وليس آخر، أرجو من الله العلي القدير أن تكلل أعمال هذا المؤتمر بالتوفيق والنجاح، مقدرة وشاكرة للجهود المبذولة والتفاني والإخلاص الصادق من القائمين على هذا المؤتمر على كافة المستويات. كما أشكر مقام وزارة الخارجية على التسهيلات المقدمة لضيوفنا الكرام من مملكتنا الحبيبة في ظل قيادتنا الرشيدة. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أكرم الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد عليه الصلاة والسلام. شكرا.
شكرا دكتورة هيفا على هذه الورقة التي ركزت على الصورة الواقعية لأهمية تعليم المرأة كرافد أساسي لتمكينها. وإلى الورقة الرابعة في هذه الجلسة التي بعنوان المرأة المسلمة في عالم الإعلام والاتصال، التحديات والفرص الممكنة. تقدمها سعادة الدكتورة سعودة عبد الباقي، أستاذ الاتصال الجماهيري في كلية الإعلام الاتصالي في جامعة إيلورين بنيجيريا، ومسؤولة العلاقات العامة لاتحاد جمعيات المرأة المسلمة، وعضو نشط في مجموعة مراقبة الإعلام الإسلامي في نيجيريا برضو. أيضا شغلت منصب رئيسة قسم الاتصال الجماهيري في أيضا نشرت العشرات من الأعمال العلمية في مجال تمكين المرأة في المجال الإعلامي. فلتتفضل.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear distinguished audience, Your Excellencies, participants at this great conference, I join others in appreciating the efforts of our father, King Salman ibn Abdulaziz Al Saud, the custodian of the two holy mosques. I equally appreciate the efforts of members of OIC for putting this together. I thank you for extending the invitation to participate in this great event to me. I say Jazakumullah khairan. The topic I'm to speak on is Muslim women in media and communication, challenges and opportunities. We all know that if we do things in the corners of our rooms without letting the world know about it, the success or the value of that particular program will be limited to us and the few people that are around us. But to make great global impacts, we need to project those activities in the media. So this goes to say that the media is an indispensable instrument for forming, transforming, reforming, and ensuring conformity of human beings with expected norms. The media equally shape the perception of individuals about others and about their environment. These are the means by which we get our messages across to achieve desired goals. In the days of old, when we talk about the media, we are concerned about the traditional media. That is talking of the broadcast media and talking about the print media. But in this age of technology, a third angle has been added to it. That is internet-based media. And this is where social networking and other social media platforms belong. So when we read in literature, we'll see that there are two categories of media being talked about now. We have the mainstream media, which comprises the print and the broadcast. Then we have the internet-based media, which we call the new media. The Quran itself is a medium, and it belongs to the arena of the print media, because in the Quran, we have communication from Allah about himself, as we have in Quran chapter 112, verses 1 to 4, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, where we have Kul Huwallahu Ahad, Allahu Samad, Lam Yalid wa Lam Yulad, wa Lam Yakun Lahu Kufuwan Ahad. That is Allah talking to us about himself. He tells us about creation, all the wonderful things that he has created, and how they form a synergy to make life worthy of living. He tells us about the purpose of creation. The saying of Allah in Surah Al-Adiyat, verse 56, that وَمَا أَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I did not create jinn and humans except to worship me. This shows the purpose of our creation. Also in the Quran, we have what Allah expects of us. We have what he says about his rewards for those who conform with his directives and his punishments for those who renege against his directives. And again, we're told that Allah is often forgiving, often merciful. The same goes for the Quran, which the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which shows us the direction of implementing the content of the Quran. We know communication involves sharing. It is an exchange of ideas and feelings. And all forms of communication are geared towards worshiping Allah. This goes to say that communication is central to the activities of all creatures, whether plants, lower animals such as ants, or higher animals such as human beings. You will recall the conversation among the ants when Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam was passing with his soldiers, and one of the ants said, "O ants, get into your holes, lest Solomon and his host crush you under their feet without even knowing." This goes to affirm that communication has definite purposes. Communication is the barometer by which we measure development. It is a tool for knowledge management. It is a tool for decision making. It expresses feelings. We will recall the early days of Islam when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam received the commandment in Cave Hira to read. He was taken aback because that was his first experience with such message, and he ran home. He ran home to the warm comfort of his wife, embrace of his wife, Khadija. May Allah be pleased with that, saying, "Zamiluni, zamiluni, envelope me or cover me up." This is using communication to express feelings. We use communication for identity, and this can be in verbal or non-verbal forms. Now coming to talk about the place of women in Islam. All the speakers that have been making their presentations since yesterday have said this. They have been very, very emphatic about this, so I will skip this from my presentation. But I would like to say that the presentation or projection of women in the media is lopsided. The media has provided very limited space for women and a larger space for men. Of this little space that is provided for women, Muslim women occupy an insignificant position in this. Why is this so? One of the conditions that govern media operation is agenda setting. The media set agenda for the world. We do say that the media may not tell you what you think, but the media certainly tells you what to think about. And this brings about the tripodal model that the media projects. We have the reality as it is. We have media reality, which is media agenda. Then we have public perception of reality. What I'm saying here in essence is that the true achievements of Muslim women in the world are not well publicized. Why? Because it is not in tandem with the media agenda. When they want to publicize it, they can frame it in ways that do not make it so attractive to others because of social expectation. The danger here is that if media created reality, that is media agenda, is at variance with actual reality and is left unchecked, it becomes accepted as public reality and displaces actual reality. And this is why what we hear about Muslim women achievements, as laudable as they are beaten down, are watered down by what we read or see in the media. They want to advance justifications for this practice. And some of the justifications are based on the golden standards of media practice, one of which is the need to be objective. One of the golden rules of media practice is that you don't get too close to those you are covering, and you do not become part of the story. That means you have to be unbiased in your story reportage. But in this age, this rule is not being observed. Reporters are involved. Reporters manipulate content of the media or of their reportage to suit their own thinking and to suit the expectation of their employers. And this is where the issue of media ownership comes in. We all know that he who pays the piper calls the tune. That is why most media organizations cannot be objective in their reportage because they have to satisfy the whims and caprices of those who pick their bills. Another factor is the issue of oddity. We say oddity is news. What is usual is not usually news because everybody knows it already. And this is why any journalist will literally jump at a story that projects Muslims as barbaric, as inhuman, and in other negative lights without digging deep enough to unearth the facts behind the story, because they have an audience that they want to satisfy, and the audience matters to them than any sense of fairness. Another rule is that whatever you're going to report should be fact-based. And when we say something should be fact-based, it means that you need to hear from all sides. There has to be balancing of your story, in your story. You need to hear from both sides, especially if you want to engage in a peace-oriented journalism. But unfortunately, most journalists do not go after balancing. The stories are usually one-sided because of the interest that they want to save. This might be as a result of the issue of timeliness, because we say news is a perishable commodity. They may tell you that they don't have much time to investigate the matter, but this is not an excuse that should be accepted. The issue of accuracy is thrown to the wind. The issue of independency is also given very little consideration. The rule to be impartial is not so much respected. And the need to respect others. We all see what is being reported in CNN as compared to what we hear, what we watch on Al Jazeera. We know which one is fairer, which one is more respectful of the feelings of others than the other. Then the issue of public accountability is equally of essence. Muslim women in the media. Our discussion here will be based on the actor network theory. This theory posits that interactions in media environments involve professionals, managers, consumers, media contents, that is talking about the language of reportage, the culture, etc., and strategic technologies. Despite the increasing positive transformations in the visibility of females in all sectors, there is still a deep gender gap in the allocation of space in the media ecology. Of the little space allotted to women, Muslim women do not constitute an appreciable percentage, especially on mainstream media. So as professionals, in the mainstream media, Muslim women occupy an insignificant proportion. In terms of content, the laudable achievements of Muslim women are rarely celebrated in the mainstream media. What do we know of Professor Rabia Said from Kano, Nigeria, a professor of atmospheric and space weather physics, who married at the age of 18 and has made great global impact in her field? If Professor Said had been a failure, the world would have blamed her early marriage for her failure. But the fact that she is a success, the early marriage does not play any significant role. Such is the situation where the world press look for the loopholes in the lives of Muslim women in order to escalate it. Muslim girls emerge as best students in their faculties in many universities in Nigeria, but they are uncelebrated in the mainstream media because they are Muslims. There is the surreptitious practice of introducing sexuality content in children's cartoons and learning materials. Few weeks ago, Nigerian lawmakers in the House of Representatives called on the federal government and other subnational governments to ban the use of the popular children's textbook, Queen Primer. Queen Primer is the book that we were all introduced to at the early stage of our learning. It is a medium of communication because it belongs to the print family. This Queen Primer makes learning of English very easy for beginners. It introduces you to 2-letter words, then you progress to 3-letter words, then you progress to 4-letter words before you begin to join all these words together to form sentences. Now, publishers have tried to introduce sexuality content into this book so that they can catch them young and brainwash the young children on pro-LGBTQ words in a covert attempt to slip books with immoral culture into primary and secondary schools in Nigeria. I want to thank the lawmakers in Nigeria for spotting this early and for drawing attention to this. If this is not spotted early, it would have created so much damages in the mindset of the youngsters so that as they grow up, they will see nothing wrong in being a lesbian, a gay, or bisexual. Rather than celebrating the good things that happen to Muslim women in the world, the media would rather present Muslim women as symbols of oppression. In the imagery of an helpless person, we project her as somebody that is likely uneducated. We present her as an evidence of poverty and inhuman treatment. And that is why you see whenever they want to talk about poverty, especially in developing countries, they'll present women that are wearing their hijab, that have about 6 or 7 or 8 children strolling around there, all crying for help. That is the media agenda that the West wants to set. Another image of the media that is projected is that of a terrorist. That is, someone who uses violent actions or threatens violent actions for a political purpose. Meanwhile, an FBI 2006 report said that only 6% of all terrorist acts are committed by religious Muslims. This is a fallacy of overgeneralization, and it has so much affected our image that whenever people see you as a Muslim woman with Muslim identity, they want to relate with you with caution because of the image that the media has imprinted in their minds. Muslim women bloggers are not spared. They are treated and received as anthropological projects, someone who lacks the capability to understand how poorly she is being treated, and whose only savior should be the West, now giving room to thrive despite diversification of, not giving room to thrive despite diversifications of strategies. The social media, driven by advancements in information and communication technology, has come to liberate us from the overpowerful dominance of the mainstream media. All of us now are citizen journalists. We have the duty to participate actively in social networking and to let the world know about the beauty of Islam, to let the world know that we are not being caged. If people do not rise up to their full potentials. It could be because of their own personal limitations, not because Islam has caged them. Social media allow us to create our own content as bloggers, short demonstration videos, infographics, photography, GIFs, memes, illustrations, etc. They also allow us to follow and stay up to date with our favorite ethnic and Islamic brands, products, and celebrities, hence becoming more visible and more viable as managers. As the world's largest religion, one would want to ask that what is the gap between the reality of a Muslim woman and the perception that is being created in the minds of the world through the media? And the first reason I have here is that media is gender blind. There is no discrimination between activities of a male journalist and a female journalist. This is unlike Islamic provision that says women should tread with caution in mingling with the opposite sex. The media does not respect this, okay? Thank you, ma'am. Other challenges that we face are the work ethics that contravene ethics of Islam. Then we have gender and social stereotypes that prejudice that often lead to misrepresentations or underrepresentation of Muslim women in the mainstream media. We have poor remuneration of journalists, which do not want to keep these trained journalists on media work because they are poorly remunerated. Then complex and lack of confidence to be different from the multitude also affect our representation in the media. Then we have lack of spousal support. Most men do not want their women to work as journalists because of the nature of the job. Muslim women also face sexual harassment while they are doing their job. Now, what are the opportunities that are available if Muslim women are deeply involved or they deeply participate in media and communication work? The first opportunity I want to say is the opportunity to educate the world about the beauty of Islam. Another one is to clear doubts and misconceptions about the status accorded women in Islam. And it also allows us to tell our own story. I followed the expressions of the Honorable Prime Minister of Bangladesh. Being a woman, she was able to create empathy. We were able to follow her. And these are some of the opportunities that...
Dr. Sauda, time is finished.
Please give me 2 minutes just to make a recommendation.
Okay.
Thank you very much. The first recommendation I have is that as Muslim women, we must be proud to be Muslims. We should seek deep knowledge of Islam, and we must be ready to demonstrate this knowledge wherever we are. We must not be silenced. We must not fall for spiral of silence consideration. We must speak out where we need to speak out. Then I want to encourage that we sponsor more Muslim girls and women to pursue communication and media studies. And lastly, I suggest that OIC should endow awards for female students that distinguish themselves in their various fields of study. Thank you very much for your attention. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
شكرا لك سعادة الدكتورة سعودة، وأكيد من المهم التشجيع على الالتزام بالمعيار الذهبي للممارسات الصحفية. وإلى المتحدثة الخامسة في هذه الجلسة والحديث عن المرأة المسلمة في بيئتها الاجتماعية بين التحديات والفرص، والذي ستتفضل بتقديمه سعادة السيدة فاطمة جيلاني، سياسية وناشطة أفغانية في مجال حقوق المرأة، شغلت سابقا منصب رئيسة جمعية الهلال الأحمر الأفغاني، كانت من أهم أعضاء فريق التفاوض أثناء عملية السلام الأفغانية بعد عام 2018، عضو في فريق التفاوض ممثلة للحكومة الأفغانية سابقاً، وهي واحدة من 4 نساء فقط شاركن في محادثات مع طالبان في الدوحة 2020. لها العديد من الكتابات والمقالات الصحفية في العديد من المجلات والصحف الدولية، فلتتفضل.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Your Royal Highness, Your Excellencies, dear friends and colleagues, this is with profound honor that I'm standing here before you, because I know it is not just gathering of minds, it is gathering of mind and hearts. This is a subject that we have to feel. It is not just subject of black and white, what is right and what is wrong. I would like to express my gratitude to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for helping this conference, and my congratulations to the Organization for Islamic Cooperation for orchestrating this fantastic gathering. Before I start my talk, I would like to, exactly as all of us said, that I would like, on behalf of the people of Afghanistan, on behalf of women of Afghanistan, I express my heart-feeling sadness to the, sadness to what is happening today in Palestine. People of Afghanistan before the wars were always remembered and supported in Palestine. The 45 years of war that Afghanistan was in hell, but we still didn't forget the people of Palestine. On the contrary, I felt their pain more. Ladies and gentlemen, the issue of this conference, talking about women and the rights of women and opportunities of women in Islam, is much more important today than ever before. As our society is progressing or has progressed, we see that still in some areas in our part of the world, we still see there is a problem, huge problem of misunderstanding and even misinterpretation of Islam. I believe that sometimes, even without thinking, we turn the interpretation of Islam in what is suit us and our own policies. I want to not repeat what is in ayat and in hadith about women and status of women. I'm talking about it because I want to re-emphasize and remember that what is our right and what are our opportunities in Islam. Women in Islam have always maintained their identity, a separate identity, an identity which was prescribed in our holy book, Quran, and by our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. That this was the beauty of this religion. If we have a closer look at the life of the Prophet and the roles of women who played there, we understand. I go quickly because it is already late. The role of al-Mu'mineen Khadija or al-Mu'mineen Aisha, and we go on and on about the fantastic experience of women that we see that they shaped the history of Islam. But I would like to talk a little bit about the history of my own country and women in my own country. Looking today in Afghanistan, will you believe if I told you that the first group of women getting out of Afghanistan for further education, they went to Turkey for the further education, was 102 years ago? Will you believe me if I tell you that I was only 8, more than 61 years ago, that women took the seats in the cabinet and in the open parliament, not an allocated quota system, but in an open parliament, for the first time, men and women went more than 61 years ago for election. They were elected and they were voting. Only one woman came from Kabul. The rest 5 of the 6 were elected in the provinces from ordinary, traditional people. I grew up as an Afghan girl and woman in a very important religious family, a prominent religious family. I not only had problem with my education, on the contrary, because I was the firstborn, my father expected me to excel in my education and be example for my younger brothers, and not only for them, but for fellow Muslims, even outside Afghanistan. It is extremely important to remember that what Afghanistan was before, the curse of war, brought Afghanistan upside down. 45 years of war is not easy. So everything changed for people of Afghanistan, and especially women. In the Muslim society, the progress, and not only in the Muslim country, in all countries, when progress came, things changed. Women had to also come slowly with those progress. But we still see in Afghanistan that, or countries like Afghanistan, that there are pockets and places that women are still struggling and the situation is not the way it should be. Sometimes we say that it is wrong interpretation of Islam, which it shouldn't be allowed. Sometimes we say that it's culture. For me, it is very difficult to accept that a culture which is against the teaching of Islam is allowed to practice. This should stop. When today in Afghanistan, when the education of women and work of women is suspended, thank God it is not, officially stopped, but suspended. I would like very much to know that what are the reasons. And this is not just a duty of an Afghan woman. It is the duty of Afghan men and women, and especially the duty of this organization, these members, that we have to put things right. This is our duty, to put everything in what our religion has prescribed. This is very important. I remember very well, when I first time, my teacher taught me, I was a child, for the first time, the importance of Iqra, the first Amr, the first order of God. I was so happy and excited. This was a very elderly teacher who happened to be my mother's Quran teacher too. When he expressed the importance of Iqra, I was so happy, and I turned to him. I said that this means that in the Muslim world, there shouldn't be one illiterate person, isn't it? I still remember his gray, sad eyes, that he looked at me and said that the sad fact is that there are most of the illiterate people, especially illiterate women, comes from our part of the world. All these women in Islamic history, we talked about these are examples. But what is important, two things for me is extremely important. One, that the first order of God was Iqra. That was not an accident. That was not a coincidence. There was hikmah behind it. That the progress of human race is when you excel in ilm and you learn. The second thing that we have to also remember, that Islam came to fight against ignorance, jahl. And this is only this when we have it in our mind that we say that this is the duty of all of us, all the people who are sitting there, all the countries who are represented here, that this has to be go ahead. In the history of Afghanistan, we had a queen in the 15th century, Gauhar Shah Begum. She was the one who started the first women's school. She was the patron of those arts that you see in the museums in Britain and other countries. She was the patron of so many important poets and scholars that we know today. Come to Malalai, my school was named after her. She was a warrior. She fought against the invaders of my country long, long years ago. What has happened? I am telling you that it was the war. I was educated. My mother was educated. My grandmother was educated. Even my great-grandmother could read and write. But what is happening today? My work in the Constitution of Afghanistan, the Constitution of 2004, I went village to village for the promotion of Constitution, and this was an Islamic Constitution. It was not a secular Constitution. Women came and talked to me, literate or illiterate, they expressed that what they're expecting from this Constitution. My work at the Afghan Red Crescent Society, Hilal Ahmar Afghani, I catered for both sides. It was a neutral body. I worked for the government, but I also catered in the area which was in the hand of Taliban. So I know how to deal with that. Or when I was in peace talks in Doha, I spoke, not even once I heard that there will be problem with the education or work of women. Today, we are not here for shame and blame. We are not here to make it a list of things which has gone wrong. We are here to mend things. We are here to fix things. We are here to find ways. And I am, in my opinion, that the only way is to stay engaged, but be honest. Not to talk about our religion wishy-washy. Our religion has a huge support for us, the Muslim women, and we have to exercise it and ask it for in all totality. But also I would like to talk about some shortcomings from those people who are blaming everything on Islam, but also with us, you people who are sitting here. In Afghanistan, although that the education of women, higher education of women and middle education of women is suspended, work of women is suspended, but it is allowed to, for women to learn medicine, midwifery, and nursing. And there is a university today in Kabul which has the capacity of 10,000 girls to study there, and it has the permission. And do you know how many people studies there? 80. It has the capacity of 10,000. Why can't we support these women to go there? And they are allowed. This university has the permission. Let's take this opportunity. We are talking about opportunity. The biggest opportunity we have today, and I'm going to end with this because I know everyone is tired, it is that for the first time after 45 years in Afghanistan, there is no war. I'm saying that the situation is not perfect, but after 45 years, there is no war. So if a correct decision is taken, in matter of days, it could go all over Afghanistan. And then I am hearing that delegation, that some of people who traveled in Afghanistan, taking from my dear sister, Her Excellency Hina Rabbani, who traveled to Afghanistan, Amina Muhammad traveled to Afghanistan, the foreign minister of Indonesia traveled to Afghanistan, and many organizations from ulamas, they all went to Afghanistan. We hear that we think that it didn't have an impact. That's not true. It did have an impact. It did have an impact, number one, on people of Afghanistan, on women of Afghanistan, that they feel that there are ulamas in the world that they are supporting us. And also, the government in Afghanistan, they are talking and they are thinking about it. But the time has come that this suspension has to stop. We, the people of Afghanistan, women of Afghanistan, and you, the most important organization for the Muslim world, let's repeat and repeat this message, and let's have, delegation after a delegation of ulamas to go there and find a solution for the women of Afghanistan. Thank you very much.
شكرا سعادة الأستاذة فاطمة جيلاني على هذه الكلمة الضافية التي تدعو إلى بذل جهود متضافرة لمواءمة العادات المحلية مع المبادئ الإسلامية. وهناك بعض المداخلات من الحضور الكريم، نأخذ مداخلتين على الأقل، لكل مداخلة 3 دقائق كحد أقصى. مداخلة من الدكتورة زينب الملا السلطاني، رئيسة جامعة الزهراء للبنات في العراق.
الرحمن الرحيم. أصحاب السمو والمعالي والسعادات، الحضور الأكارم جميعاً مع حفظ الألقاب والمسميات والعنوانات، سلام من الله عليكم ورحمة وبركات. من خلال الطروحات التي تم طرحها من ممثلي الدول، نرى أنها كلها متفقة على أن القوانين السماوية ولا سيما الشريعة الإسلامية قد كرمت المرأة ومنحتها المكانة التي تستحقها من حقوق ومنزلة، وأعظمها أن جعل الله عز وجل الجنة تحت أقدامها، ومنحها أيضاً فرصة التعلم والتثقف والتاريخ الإسلامي حافل بأسماء لامعة لنساء مسلمات خالدات. واليوم في مجتمعنا المعاصر الجميع يعلم أن الأسرة المسلمة تتعرض إلى استهداف كبير، وأنها تواجه تحديات خطيرة، وخاصة المرأة والبنت الفتاة التي ستكون أماً للأجيال القادمة. المجتمع المعاصر اليوم بحاجة إلى ترسيخ القيم والمنظومات الخلقية والقيمية المجتمعية المجسدة بالرسائل السماوية. الحضور الكريم، اسمحوا لي أن أقف قليلاً عند مصطلحي المكانة والتمكين. نحن النساء اليوم علينا أن ندرك جيداً أين تكمن مكانتنا ومنزلتنا. نحن اليوم بحاجة إلى الحفاظ على المكانة الممنوحة لنا من قبل الخالق عز وعلا كمحتوى فكري وعقلي، وليس كمادة إعلانية دعائية. أما التمكين فالمرأة الأم هي الممكنة وهي الممكنة أيضاً بالوقت ذاته، فهي المربية والمنشئة والمعلمة، وهي من تصنع الرجال، فالرجل هو نتاجها ومرآتها، وهذا بحسب الشريعة الإسلامية. أما التمكين أيضاً بمفهومه ضمن القوانين الوضعية فلا بد من منح المرأة الرصينة مساحة واسعة، وأؤيد السيدة دكتورة سعودة عبد الباقي بما عرضته. يجب أن تعطى المرأة مساحة واسعة في مواقع صنع القرار وتمكينها من أخذ فرصتها القيادية على وفق طبيعتها التي حباها الله عز وجل إياها، واقتدارها على إدارة الأزمات بإجادة تامة ورصانة عالية. ومن هذا المؤتمر المبارك نقترح على القائمين عليه الأفاضل تشكيل مجلس نسوي إسلامي أعلى يقوم على الانتخاب الدولي للخبرات النسوية والكفاءات العالية ذات الخبرة بشؤون المرأة المسلمة، وعلى وفق معايير ومؤهلات لوضع سياسات تربوية قيمية تشترك في وحدة الأهداف والثوابت، مع وضع خطط رصينة قابلة للتطبيق في المؤسسات التربوية على مستوى المدارس الابتدائية والثانوية. وختاماً، نأمل أن يحقق هذا المؤتمر توصيات مثمرة إنقاذية تعمل على تقويم الانحرافات السلوكية في مجتمعنا المعاصر. شكراً للقائمين على هذا المؤتمر، ولا سيما منظمة التعاون الإسلامي، وشكراً للحضور الأفاضل جميعاً. ولا يفوتني أن أحيي أختنا المرأة الفلسطينية الأم الصابرة المجاهدة، فتحية إجلال وإكبار لها، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
شكراً لك دكتورة زينب. السيدة إيمان بارتك، أخصائية حماية المرأة، جامعة برمنغهام البريطانية.
Assalamu alaikum. Dear Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to address you all. Special thanks to organizers and panelists of this session. Over the last decade, I heard over 300 stories of women in humanitarian emergencies. In this conference, we hear a lot about the impact of military aggression on women in Gaza, the senseless and genocidal violence. But now, I would like us to turn attention to the challenges women face beyond conflict. We need to consider the long-term harms of displacement across different settings, whether it's in Sudan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, or Yemen. Not only that women are forced to flee their countries, but they are subjected to all sorts of violence and discrimination along forced migration routes and in places of refuge. They are disproportionately vulnerable to exploitation because they are undocumented very often, without resources, they face language barriers, and have no access to work, healthcare, and education. The number of displaced people increases every year. Today, we hear of over 114 million displaced people, and the OIC countries host and generate a significant proportion of refugees worldwide. Over half of them are women. It is a global challenge, both in the global north and in global south, with a dividing rhetoric differentiating between deserving and not deserving refugees. Some countries restrict entrance of Muslim refugees. In non-Muslim countries, such as in Europe, where I come from, we can't overlook the issues of Islamophobia, the harms refugee women from religious minorities suffer because of their religious identity and wearing religious attire. In fact, displaced women experience the continuum of violence, exclusion, and discrimination. Violence intensifies along forced migration routes and in refuge. They are subjected to different forms of violence, physical, sexual, emotional, and trafficking by smugglers, traffickers, border guards, militia, authorities, other migrants even, and sometimes their partners. They suffer from long-term, lasting trauma, deprivation of basic needs, as you know, water, food, shelter, clothes, all what constitutes slow violence, leading to exclusion and even death. However, the scale of current displacement emergencies has not been matched yet with the appropriate resources, capacity, and political will to protect the displaced people's dignity and rights. That's why there's a pressing need to put displaced women and children high on the policy agenda in the OIC multilateral processes. It is a duty, it's not an option, to prioritize displaced women to ease their suffering. We need to advance the implementation of the OIC commitments to promote inclusion and protection of women in conflict and displacement. Specifically, we need to leverage and translate Resolution 4/7 or Resolution 11/8 into action that promotes joint action to support displaced and refugee women. The OIC has a crucial role to play as a significant institution uniting voices of Muslim countries in supporting displaced populations, especially by drawing on the Islamic ethics of women's protection. We need to revive an integrated strategy or process in the OIC ecosystem, bringing different organizations, subsidiaries, subspecialized and affiliated institutions to address this global challenge of displacement. As a first step, I propose to convene a multi-stakeholder roundtable workshop, perhaps at the next Ministerial Conference on Women in Pakistan, to discuss pathways to displaced women's inclusion and protection, and to build on the Islamic human rights case to protect displaced women. For that, we will need to develop an Islamic protection framework for women and displacement, for women in displacement and in conflict, to address the specific issues and challenges they face in conflict, refugee journey, and countries of refuge as minorities. Thank you so much.
شكرا لك. وقبل أن نختم هالجلسة الرابعة، أود أن أشكر المتحدثات الخبيرات على هذه المداخلات الممتازة والتي شاركوها معنا في هذه الجلسة، والتي بإذن الله ستتضمن مداخلتهن في البيان الختامي لهذا المؤتمر. وخالص الشكر والتقدير لحسن استماعكم، ونلتقيكم على خير في محافل علمية واجتماعات ثرية أخرى إن شاء الله. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
شكرا لمديرة الجلسة ولكافة المتحدثين فيها أو المتحدثات فيها. كانت هذه الجلسة الرابعة بعنوان المرأة المسلمة في المجتمعات المعاصرة، الفرص والتحديات. الآن مع تكريم المتحدثات ومديرة الجلسة يتفضل سعادة المندوب الدائم للمملكة العربية السعودية لدى منظمة التعاون الإسلامي الدكتور صالح بن حمد السحيباني، وكذلك سعادة الأمين العام المساعد للشؤون السياسية بمنظمة التعاون الإسلامي الأستاذ يوسف بن محمد الضبيعي لتكريم المتحدثات وكذلك مديرة الجلسة. أولاً معالي السيدة حنا رباني خار، وزيرة سابقة للشؤون الخارجية بدولة باكستان. سعادة الدكتورة زهراء زمرد سلجوق، مديرة عام سيسرك تركيا. سعادة الدكتورة هيفاء جمل الليث، رئيسة جامعة عفة السعودية. سعادة الدكتورة سعودة عبد الباقي، أستاذة في قسم الإعلام جامعة إيلورين نيجيريا. سعادة السيدة فاطمة جيلاني الرئيسة السابقة لجمعية الهلال الأحمر أفغانستان. ثم مديرة الجلسة سعادة الدكتورة نورة بن زيد الرشود المديرة التنفيذية للهيئة الدائمة المستقلة لحقوق الإنسان. شكرا لمديرة الجلسة ولكافة المشاركات في هذه الجلسة الرابعة التي كانت بعنوان المرأة المسلمة في المجتمعات المعاصرة، الفرص والتحديات. شكرا لكن على هذا الإثراء. سنتوقف لاستراحة قصيرة لتناول وجبة الغداء، ثم سنعود في الساعة 2 استعدادا لانطلاق الجلسة 5 في تمام الساعة 2:30. شكرا لكم.